Hi boys and girls, good to be back on YouTube, saying hi to everybody. Today we're going to continue with chapters 3 and 4, maybe 5 depending on time, of The Jacket. Now, we met our main characters, Phil and Daniel, so far. And Phil, of course, is a 6th grader. And he goes to school at a middle school. His younger brother, I believe, is in 4th grade. And Phil met Daniel because he was trying to give his brother lunch money one morning. And he saw the back of this kid, and the kid looked like he had the same jacket on as his brother. So he ran up, grabbed the kid, was calling him an idiot, and noticed, oh, it's not my brother, it's some black kid. So a fight almost happens. They get taken to the principal's office. And then Phil is noticing that Daniel doesn't want the jacket anymore now that he's found out that Phil's mother gave it to Daniel's grandmother, and then she passed it on to Daniel. I guess he believes it's charity. Well, then in the 2nd chapter, there seems to be some hostility between Phil and Daniel, and Phil's starting to notice that he knows a lot of black kids, and he gets along with them, but he doesn't really have any black friends. So he starts thinking about his town and whether he's prejudiced, whether his family is prejudiced, and different things like that. At the end of chapter 2, Phil is getting lunch, and he doesn't have enough to get ice cream, and Daniel is behind him and offers to pay, but he's not offering to pay in a nice way. He's acting like it's charity, and he's trying to embarrass Phil, I guess maybe to get back at him. So Phil puts ice cream back, gets away, eats his lunch, goes outside, and he notices a whole group of black kids laughing and staring at him. And so he starts feeling paranoid, and then he notices one of the black kids standing there with no jacket on, freezing in the cold, and it's Daniel. So he's refusing to even wear the jacket because Phil's mother had given it to his grandmother, and then she gave it to Daniel. We're going to continue on with the next chapters, and hopefully you guys are enjoying the book. If you're on YouTube, on your phone or a tablet, make sure you scroll all the way down to find the comment area so you can tell me if you like the story or not. Because if you're not liking it, if most people aren't liking it, I can move on to something else. But remember, this is by Andrew Clements. He's the same author as Frindle that we read for One Book, One Fred a few years ago. He's an excellent author. We have a ton of his books in our library. And this book, I think, brings up a lot of great questions about all of us. Do we have different kind of friends? Do we have friends who are different than us? Or are all our friends the same as us? So question yourself too, because does Daniel, who's black, have any white friends? Does he like white kids? Does he get along with them? And same with Phil. Phil's already started to recognize that. So the next few chapters, Phil talks to his family and continues to think about this question and to think about his town and whether there's a lot of prejudice in the town or not. All right, so here we go with The Jacket by Andrew Clements. Part 3, Close to Home. Now that he was in 6th grade, Phil walked home from school after basketball practice. It was only 6 blocks. Sometimes he walked home with a friend or two, sometimes on his own. And on the days when it wasn't pouring rain or bitterly cold, he enjoyed it. He liked to take his time getting home, sometimes going a block or 2 out of his way to walk through the little shopping area near his house. If he had some money, he'd stop and buy gum or maybe a donut. And he always liked just looking around, letting his mind wander along with his eyes. But walking home by himself this particular Thursday afternoon, Phil felt like he'd never seen this part of the city before. Everywhere he looked, he saw white people. He saw moms driving cars full of kids home from school. White moms and white kids. He saw the neat row houses with tiny front yards where kids dropped their sleds and shovels after it snowed last week. Their snowmen and snow forts were half melted now. Phil thought back to spring and summer, when all the little kids had been outside playing, and he tried to remember seeing an African-American kid, and he couldn't. There were larger homes, too. Homes with real driveways and garages and small lawns, some of them surrounded with fancy iron fences. This time of year, in addition to the beware of dog signs and the security system notices, the fences were decorated with red ribbons and Christmas wreaths. Phil looked around as he walked and tried to think if any black families lived anywhere in this neighborhood, and he couldn't think of one. Not one family. Not ever. Phil turned at the corner of Belden Street so he could walk through the shopping area. The small trees that lined the street were covered with blinking lights, and the storefronts and shop windows were decorated for Christmas. The sidewalks were busier than usual, not crowded, but still there were lots of people, lots of white people. Not everyone was white, of course. Phil saw a few Asian people, women mostly, dressed nicely, carrying shopping bags, plus some Asian kids, junior high school girls. And he saw a high school boy who might have been Hispanic. It was hard to tell. There were some black people in the shopping area too, but not many. Phil counted as he walked along. He saw 4 black people, 1 man and 3 women. The man was driving a bus, but Phil counted him anyway. None of the black women on the sidewalks looked like they had been shopping today. No bags or packages. They weren't browsing, weren't looking in the store windows. They all looked like they were going someplace else. Somewhere else. In fact, 2 of the black women were waiting at the bus stop, waiting to get on a bus, to go somewhere else. Just like the black kids at school. And Phil thought, I can tell those women don't live close by. They just don't look like they belong here. And Phil then heard himself. He heard himself thinking that thought. They just don't look like they belong here? Phil stopped so suddenly that a man behind him on the sidewalk almost knocked him down. Whoa, the man said. Sorry there, young fella. You all right? Phil nodded absently and said, Yeah, I'm fine. But it wasn't true. Phil wasn't all right. He stood on the sidewalk staring at the 2 women when they got on their bus, and he thought, This morning, what if Daniel had been a white kid? Would I have grabbed him like that? If he had looked like he belonged in that jacket, would I have said he stole it? The bus pulled away from the curb, and Phil started walking again. Turning a corner, he looked up and saw his own reflection in the shop window. He saw a white kid who looked like he belonged here. Phil turned away from the window. He began to run, and he didn't stop until he got home. When his mom opened the front door at 5:15, Phil was waiting for her. How come you never told me I was prejudiced? His mom set the grocery bags on the floor and looked at him. What? What are you talking about? I'm prejudiced. I am, and you never told me. Who says you're prejudiced? Somebody call you that? No, but it's true. I know what it means because we learned about it on Martin Luther King Day. It means you don't like black people. All right, his mom said, just hold it right there. Let me get my coat off. Then come into the kitchen with me and tell me what this is all about. So as his mom started making dinner, Phil sat on a stool at the tall counter and told her what had happened at school. When he got to the part in the principal's office, when Daniel threw the jacket down, she clucked her tongue and said, Poor dear, he must have felt so embarrassed. Then, Phil told about walking home. No black people live around here, Mom, none. And when I saw these black ladies in front of the bakery, like, waiting for a bus, I said to myself, they don't belong here. Just like that. Like I belong here because I'm white, and they don't because they're black. So that's prejudiced, right? I'm prejudiced, and I didn't even know it. Standing Standing at the stove, his mom said, "But you're not prejudiced, honey. Stop saying that." Phil shook his head. "But it's true. I think I am." "Well, take it from me, you're not. It's all in your imagination. You're not prejudiced. You're just a kid, and you're a good kid, too. You had this problem with another boy, and the boy happens to be black, that's all. And we live in a part of town where it's mostly white people. Tell me this, did you choose to live here?" "No." "See? You've got nothing to do with it. Did you even choose to be white? Is that your fault?" "Well, no." "Exactly. Now stop worrying about this and set the table. But first, go wash your hands and knock on Juliana's door and tell her to come help me get the supper on." Phil started to climb off the stool and then stopped. "How come you gave Lucy that jacket?" "Because it's a perfectly good jacket and Jimmy didn't want it. And I knew Lucy had a grandson who might fit it." "You knew Lucy had a grandson?" "Sure I knew." "And you didn't give it to her because she's poor and black?" "No, of course not. Your old blue blazer from 4th grade? I just gave that to Mikey Coulter's mom. And you know they're not poor, and they're not black either. When you have something nice to share, you share. Besides, Lucy is my friend." Phil nodded. "Only not really your friend, right?" His mom looked at him sternly. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I mean, if she's really a friend, then, like, you'd go to the movies with her sometimes, right? Or have her over for dinner with her family. Or maybe go bowling, like with you and Mrs. Donato." His mom tilted her head, choosing her words carefully. "Well, right. Lucy's not that kind of friend, not really a close friend, more like someone you know at work." "So, have you ever had a black friend? I mean, a close friend?" "No, not really." "Well, how come?" "It's just never happened, that's all." "Maybe it's because you're prejudiced, too, like me, and you didn't know it, like me." "For the last time, Philip, you are not prejudiced. Now, just forget about it and go get your sister to come down here, right now." Phil knew that tone of voice. It meant end of discussion. He got off the stool and was going out the doorway when his mom said, "And Philip, let's not talk about this to your dad." He turned around and looked at her. "Why?" "Because it'll just upset him, that's all." "How come?" "Because I know your father, and it just will. That's all." Phil shrugged, then turned and headed for the stairway. He didn't ask, "How come?" again. He didn't have to. He was pretty sure he knew why his dad would get upset. There was only one answer Phil could think of, and it has to be because Dad is prejudiced like me. Part 4, Forget About It. Friday morning was cold, complete with rain and sleet driven by a stiff west wind. It was the kind of day when Phil rode the bus to school. He didn't ride that often, so he was looking forward to it. Climbing the steps, he smiled at the driver. Then he turned and looked for his seat. He saw one near the back, but scanning the bus, he also saw something else. This whole bus is white kids, only white kids. No, because there's Julie Chin, and she's not white. But she's not black. No black kids on my bus, not one. Phil had done pretty well until he got on the bus, because he'd been trying to forget about everything that had happened on Thursday. That's what his mom had said he should do. She said, "Forget about it." So he tried. Because during dinner and most of Thursday night, it was all he could do to not think about it, about his being white, and about feeling prejudiced. He hadn't said anything more about it because his mom had said he shouldn't, especially not to his dad. Forget about it. But looking around, Phil tried to imagine what it would be like for Daniel if he were on this bus right now. Would that make Daniel feel weird? Or how about if I was on Daniel's bus right now? What would that be like? Because Phil knew that Daniel's bus was practically all black kids, and part of the town where Daniel's bus was coming from It had to be almost opposite from his, right? Like only black families and no white families? And Phil thought, you can figure out a lot just from looking around a bus. Phil would have kept thinking about it, but his friend Lee poked him on the shoulder and said, "Hey Phil, what you get on that social studies test?" So for the rest of the short ride to school, Phil and Lee talked about how boring social studies was and how stupid it was to have to learn about ancient Egypt, except for the pyramids, plus mummies and treasure and junk like that. That part was okay. Phil was glad to keep talking. For about 5 minutes, it helped him forget all about that other stuff. But after getting off the bus, he walked up the front steps and into the school, then turned left to go to his locker. As he passed the big windows to the office, he glanced to his right, and he saw something that made everything come crashing back into his head. The jacket, hanging there on the coat rack outside Mrs. Cormier's office. Jimmy's jacket. Then he thought, no, it's Daniel's jacket. There was no way Phil could avoid going past the office during his day. Hurrying to math for first period, as he came to the big windows, he looked down at the floor and counted 10 footsteps before he looked up again. On his way back to art class, he pretended the office wasn't there. He turned his head to the left and admired the plaques and posters on the opposite wall. Going to the library for the third period reading, he studied the pattern on the shirt of the kid in front of him in line. And after library, he cut through the auditorium. He told himself it was so he could say hi to Carolyn Swanson, who was up on the stage getting ready for music class, but he knew that wasn't true. He went that way so he wouldn't have to walk past the office again. Then on his way to lunch, Phil couldn't help himself. He sneaked a look through the office window. The jacket was still there. Phil had brought a bag lunch. He'd done it on purpose so he could just walk into the cafeteria and go right to his table and sit down and eat. He didn't want to stand around in the lunch line just in case, because Daniel might be looking for me. Like, he'll maybe try to embarrass me again. And maybe Daniel will talk to all his friends about me. Like, maybe they're going to gang up on me out on the playground. Or maybe Daniel cut out my picture from the yearbook and put it on the internet, and now everybody in the world knows I'm prejudiced. Except my mom. But of course, nothing happened at lunch or at recess. Even though he kept a sharp lookout, Phil didn't spot Daniel once. That made him curious. So after recess, he went to his social studies classroom a few minutes early. He walked to the front of the room, and Mr. Linton looked up from the book he was reading, his face lifting into a smile when he saw Phil. "How's it going, Phil?" "Okay." Phil smiled and put his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. Mr. Linton waited a second or two to see if Phil had anything else to say. Then he nodded and turned back to his book. Mr. Linton's desk was messy, but Phil knew what he was looking for. When he saw it, he knew why he hadn't seen Daniel at lunch or recess. Daniel was on the absent list. Class began, but Phil didn't hear much of what Mr. Linton was saying. He was remembering Daniel out on the playground yesterday, out in the freezing cold, without a jacket. Jeez, he's probably sick. He's probably got something terrible because it's so cold. Like, really, really sick. Or he's at the hospital or something. And if the doctors say, "How come you're sick?" what's he gonna say? He's gonna say it's all because of me. And what if he dies? Oh my God, they're gonna put me in prison. I'm a killer. Phil knew his imagination was running away with him, but still, he decided he had to do something. About 10 minutes before the last bell of the day, Phil got permission from his English teacher to go to the office. He said there might be a message there from his mom, which was true, because there might be one, except Phil knew there wasn't. He stopped at his locker first and got his backpack, along with his math book and social studies homework. He also grabbed his gym bag, but he took out his shoes and shirt and shorts and left them in his locker. Phil hurried to the office. His timing was perfect. It was that quiet moment right before the end of the day craziness begins. The principal was already out in front of the school getting ready for the bus loading. It was only Phil and Mrs. Dunn in the office, which was what Phil wanted. Stepping toward one end of the long counter, he said, Can I buy a pencil? I really need one for math, because Mrs. Kinnan doesn't let us use pens. Mrs. Dunn sighed and said, all right, hang on while I get you one. She got up slowly from her desk and walked to the storeroom at the rear of the office, which was just what Phil knew she would do, because that's where the school store supplies are kept. And when she went into the storeroom, Phil took a quick step to the left, grabbed the jacket off the coat rack, bent down below the counter, and stuffed it into his unzipped gym bag. When he straightened up, Mrs. Dunn was coming back through the storeroom door. Phil's face was flushed, but he smiled as best he could, and when she laid the pencil on the counter, he handed her 15 cents, gulped, and said, thanks. You're welcome. Have a good weekend, dear. You too. Phil left the office, and as he walked down the stairs and out the door to get on the bus, number 7, he carefully closed the long zipper on his gym bag. So there was chapter 3 and 4 of The Jacket by Andrew Clements. And we have Phil, who's still questioning himself and wondering about his town. He doesn't see hardly any black people in his neighborhood or in the little shopping area around his neighborhood. He also has some thoughts that make him feel like he's kind of prejudiced too, like black people wouldn't belong there anyway. He goes home and tells his mom what happened with Daniel. She doesn't believe he's prejudiced, and she doesn't feel she is either, even though she doesn't have any black friends. She just says that the chance just hasn't ever come up. Well, Phil is still feeling unsure about everything, so he keeps saying the same stuff. But his mom tells him not to talk to his dad. I guess we'll see it in the next chapter about his father and about Lucy, who is Daniel's grandmother and comes and helps clean on Saturdays. Now, Phil, in the 4th chapter, is starting to feel something different about Daniel. What do you think he's feeling? He finds out that Daniel is absent, and Phil goes to the office because he notices the jacket's still there, and he takes the jacket. What do you think he's going to do with the jacket? Do you think he's going to take it home and hide it so nobody has to see it ever again, and then the problem will go away? Or is he going to do something else with it? Maybe he's going to give it to someone else. Who knows? So at this point, you guys will go to Schoology to look at the jacket activities. I'm going to load some more in there today. There's some book trailers. There's some questions I have for you. And we'll have more questions about these 2 chapters. All right? And please comment. Scroll down to the bottom if you're on your cell phone and you're on YouTube. Scroll down to the bottom to comment. If you're on a computer or laptop or tablet, it should be a little easier to find the comments, but still scroll down until you see it. All right, I hope you're enjoying the book. Miss y'all still. Hope we get back to school soon. I'm getting a little bit bored of not being able to go anywhere. So keep reading, keep having fun, any fun that you can have. Check out Miss Shepard's, Mr. Smith's, and Miss Leniak's videos as well. And we would love to hear from you either on YouTube or Schoology. All right, take care and stay healthy. Bye.